Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News Program with me, Kirifa Zachary, and up next are the top stories. Venezuela's Maduro captured, held in Brooklyn prison while his VP is named acting president, vowing to protect the country's sovereignty and independence. Next, Yemen's government deploys forces in the east and launches aid flights while its leadership demands all travel restrictions on citizens and also in our news, Sudan conflict escalates in Darfur with over 100 killed in a week while key infrastructure is targeted in another region. And later on, Russia blames Ukrainian drones for a deadly car attack in Belgorod and a blackout affecting over 11,000 residents in Kursk. The details are right up. Hello again and welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, Venezuela is in turmoil after U.S. forces captured President Nicolas Maduro in an operation that U.S. officials say removed him from power and brought him to New York to face criminal charges. Caracas has declared the move an illegal abduction. Venezuela's Supreme Court has named Vice President Delcy Rodriguez acting president, and the UN Security Council is set to meet on Monday. Here's Yassine Rikti with the details.
An unprecedented international crisis erupted this weekend after a U.S. operation in Caracas resulted in the detention of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. U.S. officials say the couple were taken out of Venezuela and flown to the United States to face a federal indictment unsealed by the Department of Justice. The indictment accuses Maduro and associates of leading a long-running narco-trafficking and narco-terrorism conspiracy.
Nicolas Maduro Moras, the defendant, is at the forefront of that corruption and has partnered with his co-conspirators to use his illegally obtained authority and the institutions he corroded to transport thousands of tons of cocaine to the United States. Since his early days in the Venezuelan government, Maduro Moras has tarnished every public office he has held.
Journalists at the scene report loud explosions in Caracas before the operation. U.S. officials say the president was transported from Venezuela and processed at U.S. law enforcement facilities in New York and is being held pending a Manhattan court appearance Monday. International reporting shows Maduro in U.S. custody and en route to a detention facility pending arraignment. In Caracas, the response was immediate. Venezuela's constitutional chamber of the Supreme Court issued an order naming Vice President Delcy Rodriguez to assume the duties of the presidency to guarantee administrative continuity while Maduro is held, a decision the government framed as necessary to defend the country. Meanwhile, Venezuela's defense minister backed Rodriguez and announced mobilization of forces.
In the forced absence of the President of the Republic, in light of the exceptional situation caused by the kidnapping of the citizen Nicolas Maduro Moro, President of the Republic, which constitutes a case of material and temporary impossibility for the exercise of his functions. It is hereby ordered that Delcy Ilona Rodriguez Gomez, Executive Vice President of the Republic, assume and exercise all the powers, duties and authorities inherent to the office of the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
The U.S. government characterized the operation as a law enforcement action to bring a suspect to justice. President Trump said the United States would temporarily run aspects of Venezuela's administration, including moves involving its oil resources, while a transition is secured. That statement and the manner of the operation has prompted immediate condemnation from many capitals and raised legal questions about sovereignty and the use of force.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about.
Venezuela's UN ambassador and other governments have requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss what they described as an attack and a breach of international law. Diplomatic sources said the Security Council is scheduled to convene Monday. As the region reacts, the next 48 hours will focus on the Manhattan court hearing, the Venezuelan government's internal response under Vice President Rodriguez, and the UN Security Council session, each likely to shape how the international community responds to what many are calling a historic and deeply polarizing moment.
And in the same context, Venezuela's Supreme Court says acting President Delcy Rodriguez will ensure continuity of the state and oversee governance following President Maduro's arrest. In a statement, the head of the court's constitutional chamber said Rodriguez will safeguard national sovereignty during the president's enforced absence.
Delcy Eloína Rodríguez Gómez.
Delcy Rodriguez will assume responsibility for determining the legal regime applicable to guarantee the continuity of the state, the management of government, and the defense of sovereignty in the forced absence of the President of the Republic.
Del presidente de la República.
And earlier in the day, Venezuelan soldiers have described the raid that led to the arrest of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife in Caracas. They said loud explosions were heard around 2 a.m. on Saturday, followed by a firefight as U.S. forces carried out an airborne assault, capturing the couple and flying them to New York.
They attacked us when they wanted to land in our unit. We weren't going to allow it. We joined forces to make them leave because they couldn't land there. If they landed in our unit, they would take it over, and we couldn't allow that. We defend our unit because we know they wanted to land there. When the helicopter was coming down, we had to take action, because otherwise they would have taken our unit. We are free people, and we will do anything to defend our homeland.
On a related note, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Sunday raised the prospect of ground invasion of Venezuela, confirming the continued large-scale military deployment in the Caribbean. Speaking to NBC News, Rubio said the Trump administration will maintain what it described as an oil embargo on the country.
People are during this transition.
It wasn't necessary because this was not an invasion. We didn't occupy a country. This was an arrest operation. This was a law enforcement operation. He was arrested on the ground in Venezuela by FBI agents, read his rights, and removed from the country. Ultimately, this is not about securing the oil fields. This is about ensuring that no sanctioned oil can come in and out until they make changes to the governance of that entire industry.
For his part, Venezuelan Defense Minister General Vladimir Padrino Luis announced the mobilization of the armed forces to safeguard national sovereignty. He confirmed the military's recognition of Vice President Delcy Rodriguez as interim president and urged Venezuelans to return to normal life following President Maduro's arrest by Washington.
Nuestro comandante en jefe. La Fuerza Armada Nacional Bolivariana.
In view of the decision of the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Tribunal of Justice dated January 3, 2026, pursuant to which citizen Delcy Eloína Rodriguez Gómez, Executive Vice President of the Republic, was appointed to temporarily assume all powers, duties and authorities as President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, we hereby activate throughout the entire national territory and in full coordination among the popular, military and police forces a state of full operational readiness in order to integrate the components of the national power into the mission of confronting imperialist aggression and to form a single combat bloc to guarantee freedom, independence and national sovereignty.
Two reactions now. China's foreign ministry expressed deep concern over the U.S. arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, calling it a serious violation of international law and UN principles. The ministry demanded their immediate release and safety, emphasizing that disputes should be resolved through dialogue and diplomacy to protect sovereignty and international stability. Similarly, the African Union said it is closely monitoring events in Venezuela after U.S. strikes in Caracas and President Nicolas Maduro's arrest. In a statement, the AU called for respect for international law, peaceful dispute resolutions, and adherence to constitutional and institutional frameworks, expressing solidarity with the Venezuelan people and urging measures to preserve regional stability. And at the public opinion level, hundreds marched through Havana on Saturday to condemn U.S. strikes on Venezuela and show support for President Nicolas Maduro. Led by President Miguel Díaz-Canel at the city's anti-imperialist platform, protesters denounced the Trump administration's use of force, chanting slogans against the U.S. and imperialism.
We firmly condemn this attack, and we Cubans are ready to resolutely defend our country and sovereignty, while also fully supporting brother countries like Venezuela.
Maduro is the legitimate president elected by the Venezuelan people. Therefore, the U.S. government, especially the U.S. president, has no right to carry out such a large-scale military operation in Venezuela.
Similarly, thousands protested across Latin America and Europe against the arrest of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Demonstrations took place in Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, and in Spanish, Italian, and Polish cities, with participants voicing their rejection of Maduro and his wife's detention. And to another front, and as a consequence to this development, energy markets are watching closely amid concerns the U.S. airstrikes on Venezuela could disrupt Latin American oil supplies and add to global market uncertainty. Here's Salman Seb.
On the brink of an exceptionally sensitive moment, global oil markets are bracing for the repercussions of a geopolitical shock in Venezuela as fast-moving developments threaten to reshape pricing dynamics with the opening of trading in London and New York. The picture emerging from Caracas suggests the possibility of an upward price gap in futures trading, one that could push oil prices back to record levels, driven by investor anxiety over the sudden removal of Venezuelan crude from the global supply equation. The attacks in Venezuela are not directly targeting oil facilities. However, previous attacks on vessels and the latest sanctions have already caused production to fall by nearly 25%. The impact on oil prices is unlikely to be sharp due to the unexpected buildup in inventories. That said, unplanned disruptions in Venezuela, Russia, and Kazakhstan are increasing, which will gradually erode these inventories. This situation places the OPEC Plus alliance before a highly delicate strategic task at its meeting on Sunday. The group faces the responsibility of balancing the maintenance of current supply levels with the need to contain a potential supply shock. Venezuelan heavy crude cannot be easily replaced with lighter grades. Alternatives tend to be more expensive and could put upward pressure on refined product prices. Looking forward ahead, political and security developments in Venezuela open the door to radical scenarios for reshaping the global energy map, leaving markets hostage to deep uncertainty that could keep millions of barrels of Venezuela's vast reserves trapped underground for far longer than current forecasts suggest.
And to have some insights about the energy market, I am joined by Mr. Shuaib Boutamin, an international energy expert from Algiers. Mr. Shuaib, my first question goes like this. What are the short and medium-term effects on global crude supply and prices, considering Venezuela's production, export disruption, and potential U.S. SPR releases?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. As you know, Venezuela has the largest reserves of oil, crude oil in the world, surpassing 330 billion barrels, and that's why Venezuela, I think, now is targeted by the big powers. As you know, Venezuela, as I said, has the largest reserves of oil in the world, but its production is very weak compared to the other countries. So Venezuela is exporting like less than 0.9 million barrels of oil per day. And I think that a lack of investment in the sector of oil and gas didn't really help Venezuela to develop, let's say, its asset, a long-term asset. And we know that Venezuela at the moment is targeted by new attacks. And I think that Venezuela at the moment is facing a big challenges, economic challenges, because Venezuela is heavily reliant on oil and to, let's say, to overcome its national economy.
Mm-hmm. So what impact might this have on investment and production across, let's say, upstream, midstream, and even downstream sectors and the energy security of major importers?
You know that there is no big investment, foreign investment in Venezuela. You know that. So Venezuela was targeted by sanctions, and sanctions on many institutions. So now the only national company dealing talking about oil gas is PDVSA. It's a national oil company in Venezuela, and it has very limited deals with the foreign companies. It has, we know that has a contract with Chevron, by the way. Chevron is investing at the moment in Venezuela, and it's buying the Venezuelan oil. By the way, just to open the bracket, Chevron was not targeted by the U.S. Sanctions.
Of course,
and
because
Chevron
it's an American company.
Is still buying the Venezuelan oil. So,
yeah,
exactly. So now I think investment was very limited. And to be honest with you, I had the chance to work in this country, let's say 10 or 12 years ago. We had seen only the PDVSA, the national oil company, and the Chinese company. Because as you know, Venezuela was targeted by sanctions. That's why it had no access to buy spare parts from other countries, except, let's say, Russia and China. So the dominance, the Chinese dominance in Venezuela is so obvious over there. And I think investment is very, very tight. Talk about investment at the moment.
But
we don't know what will happen in the next future. It will be very tight, but let's wait and see what will happen in the next few months, let's say.
Great. But how would Venezuela's attack affect actually the OPEC dynamics and its membership role?
Yeah, we have to remember, everybody, that Venezuela is a founding member of the OPEC in 1960. So it was very, very active and still very active member. Venezuela also is a member of GECF. So it was all the time active in both organizations, and all the time Venezuela was present, was all the time defending the interest of the oil producers in the world. But now, as I say, the impact will be very huge in the OPEC. Why will be the impact will be very high? Because as you know, the OPEC launched a few years ago to, let's say, is cutting oil, decided to cut more than 5.8 million barrels of oil per day. And the last few months, the OPEC now succeeded to pump now 2.9 million barrels of oil per day. But we still half of that volume, let's say I'm talking about 5.8, still not really pumped to the market. Now we are talking about the share of Venezuela. Will be Venezuela able to pump and wind more oil to the market after this crisis? Will be Venezuela contributing in the upcoming decisions to increase or to decrease the quotas? I think it will have big impact, and I strongly believe that Venezuela, with its biggest reserves in the world, will still play a crucial role in the whole organizations of the OPEC and GECF. By the way, Venezuela has, as I said, it has the largest reserves of oil in the world, 330 billion barrels of oil. It has more than 4.5 TCM, trillion cubic meters of natural gas. So there are very, very big resources in Venezuela. And I think that this country will have very, very big role to play in the global oil markets.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Shuaib Boutamin. You are an international energy expert from Algiers. You are live with us. Thank you indeed. To other news now. Yemen's Hadramaut Governor Salem al-Khanbashi announced on Sunday that government forces have regained full control of the province following clashes with the Southern Transitional Council. Speaking at As-Sayoun International Airport, he confirmed the council's forces were expelled and said administrative duties and normalcy have been restored.
By force, we compelled these groups to withdraw in a very short and record time. We were able to drive them out after they attempted to take control of Hadramaut's institutions and serve their own interests, diverting tax revenues into their own pockets. May God protect our country from such schemes and conspiracies. We extend our sincere gratitude to the local authorities, particularly the security and military forces of Hadramaut, for their efforts and dedication. We also hope that the Transitional Council will recognize the limits of its capabilities, and we call on the authorities to take necessary measures in this regard.
Meanwhile, Yemen's government forces known as the Homeland Shield entered Mukalla, the capital of Hadramaut, on Sunday after Southern Transitional Council forces withdrew. State TV showed troops arriving from the east, greeted by crowds lining the streets. Mukalla is the province's key city hosting the seaport, a Daba oil terminal, and Riyadh International Airport. Yemen's Transport Ministry announced Sunday that flights from Aden International Airport have resumed after a 3-day halt. Domestic and international services are now operating to Riyadh and Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, Amman in Jordan, and Cairo in Egypt. In Yemen, still, the presidency on Sunday urged what it called the Southern Transitional Council to immediately lift all restrictions on citizen movement. A source cited by Sabah News said the measures in Aden blocking access through the city's main entrances violate the constitution and breach the Riyadh Agreement. Moving on now to the harsh reality of Palestinian displaced families who are living in makeshift tents amid ruins and widespread destruction. Here's Zahra Farjani.
On this beach, now turned into a makeshift camp, dozens of displaced families are crowded into fragile tents. Each one carries a story of escape, loss, and little hope. When the rain begins, their shelter turns into a nightmare, and every night becomes a struggle to keep their children safe.
I have been displaced for 2 years and we live in a tent. Our life is difficult and unsuitable. The tent is ruined and water always rushes into it when it rains. Of course, I'm worried about the risk of my children being drowned in the rainwater. And we cannot sleep when it rains, especially at night, as we have to check the condition of the tent, remove the water that flows in, and put sandbags around it. The war has stopped for a while, but we don't feel the ceasefire.
All around them, destruction is absolute. Homes reduced to rubble, streets left empty, and memories wiped away. Yet, life goes on despite everything.
Although we have no house and are returning to the tent, we are very happy, and for us this day is more beautiful than the day of Eid because we are returning to our original areas in the north.
Here, every look raises a silent question. What will remain after the next wave of violence? The ceasefire offers a brief moment to breathe, but how long will it last?
The Gaza Strip has suffered a lot of aggression during the past 2 years. This aggression was incredible and was unprecedented. It touched every aspect of life in Gaza Strip, destroyed all the infrastructure, most of the houses, churches, mosques, almost everything has been targeted, demolished or destroyed.
Caught between the sea and the ruins, these families are simply searching for a place to endure, for shelter, for safety, for a moment to breathe in a world that seems to have forgotten them.
And on the ground in Gaza still, 3 Palestinians were killed by Zionist occupation forces on Sunday in yet another violation of the ceasefire agreement. Reports said a fisherman was killed and another wounded in southern Gaza, while 2 others died in Khan Yunis. Occupation forces also carried out airstrikes and artillery shelling in central Gaza's Al Buraij area, with gunboats firing near the Gaza city coast. For its part, Doctors Without Borders may halt operations in Gaza next March. The organization's head, Isabelle de Forny, warned on Saturday. She said staff registrations expired on December 31st and Zionist occupation authorities have not responded to requests to renew them, forcing the group to consider ending its work, which it called a clear violation. And in occupied Palestine, over 12,000 children have been forcibly displaced in the occupied West Bank, left without shelter amid the ongoing attacks on refugee camps. The UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, Ottawa, announced an emergency education program to help these children continue learning, offering access to Ottawa schools through temporary classrooms and online platforms. Elsewhere in the Middle East, 2 Lebanese were killed and another injured in a Zionist occupation airstrike in southern Lebanon on Sunday. According to the Lebanese national news agency, a Zionist drone struck a vehicle in the Safad, El Batih and El Jumayma road, killing 2 and wounding 1. In Syria this time, people have started swapping their old banknotes for new ones to replace the currency of al-Assad era. The move is seen as a symbolic break from the past and aims to rebuild confidence in the country's economy. Here's Karim Mustafa with more.
After more than a decade of war and economic collapse, the Syrian government says it is taking a major step to revive the national economy. Across the country, hundreds of Syrians are lining up at banks and money transfer offices to exchange old banknotes for newly issued currency introduced at the beginning of 2026. The move comes as a part of broader monetary reform aimed at stabilizing the Syrian lira, which has suffered severe devaluation amid years of conflict, sanctions and financial isolation.
There is a big difference. First of all, if there is a transaction with the old currency, we have to carry them in a big trash bags or something, and we are scared of being robbed. Anyone knows that difference is 2 zeros. It is cheaper, better, and they are lightweight.
Under the reform, authorities have removed 2 zeros from the national currency, a measure officials say is designed to curb inflation, simplify daily transactions and restore public confidence in the lira.
It creates confusion for a month or more than a month until people get used to it. Some people make mistakes. For example, some shops that I went to, I saw them writing the prices with old and new currency.
Of course, we will get confused at first, but not very much. For example, £10,000 means it is £1 million. It is good to put money in your wallet, not like before. My God reward them, those who made this happen. Honestly, they made an achievement, and we thank them very much.
However, not everyone is convinced. Some bankers and economic observers warn that without deeper structural reforms, the new currency could fuel inflation and further weaken purchasing power. The governor of Syria's central bank has dismissed those concerns, insisting the exchange process will be carried out smoothly. For many Syrians, the new banknote symbolizes cautious optimism, a small but significant step toward economic recovery as the country struggles to turn the page on years of war.
In the Middle East still, Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia Sudani announced on Sunday the end of the International Coalition's mission in Iraq, saying Ain al-Assad Air Base will soon be handed over to Iraqi forces. Speaking at a ceremony marking 6 years since the death of the leaders of victory, Sudani said Baghdad is completing national sovereignty with the state's monopoly on arms aimed at protecting Iraq, stressing that the process will entirely be Iraqi-led.
Our efforts have been fruitful, resulting in agreement to end the presence of international coalition in Iraq and to shift toward cooperation based on bilateral relations. Real success, however, will be achieved with the recovery of Ain al-Assad base in the coming days. We must adhere to the government's vision, which seeks to be the sole authority controlling arms, principle that stands at the core of its governmental program.
الخاصة بوجوب حصر السلاح بيد الدولة التي كانت من أهم مواد البرنامج الحكومي.
Fighting in Sudan's western Darfur region left 114 people dead in a single week as clashes between the army and rapid support forces intensified. AFP, citing medical sources, reported that an army drone strike killed 51 civilians in Zarga last Saturday, while RSF attacks around Karnoi over 5 days killed 63 and wounded 57 others. Meanwhile, the Sudanese army launched heavy airstrikes on rapid support forces positions in North Darfur, targeting Darnar, Gourair and Wadi Ruhal in the Zarq area. Military sources said several senior RSF commanders were killed or wounded in the attacks. The Somali army announced the recapture of Jalib Marka in Lower Shabelle, southern Somalia, from terrorist groups. In a joint operation by security and intelligence forces on Saturday evening, peace was restored to the area, which had been under a Shabab control. To another story, and as you followed in our headlines, Russian authorities said a Ukrainian drone attack on a car in Belgorod, killed one person and critically injured 2 others. Russian authorities in Kursk reported Sunday that a Ukrainian drone attack on a power plant in Komotovka cut electricity to over 11,000 residents. The regional governor told RIA Novosti that crews are working to restore the power. And finally, it's time to catch up on more international news in the News in Brief.
According to Russia's defense ministry's statement, Russian forces took control of a village in Ukraine's northeastern Kharkiv region. Ukrainian authorities have yet to comment on Russia's claim. An independent verification is difficult due to the ongoing war, nearing its 5th year. However, Ukraine's general staff said Russian forces launched 4 assaults against its positions near 8 settlements in Kupiansk direction.
At least 30 people were killed and several others abducted when gunmen attacked a market in Nigeria's Niger state following a series of violent raids that began on Friday in the nearby villages Agwara and Borgo. Police reported that the attack occurred in Kosowan Daji market in Dimo village at around 4:30 p.m. and according to witnesses, the bandits arrived on motorcycles and opened fire indiscriminately.
Japan's defense ministry strongly condemned the reported launch of several ballistic missiles by North Korea towards the sea of its east coast. This North Korean missile launch is considered the first in 2 months of the new year. The latest test came just hours before South Korean president visit to China for a summit.
Flights across Greece were grounded on Sunday, stranding thousands of travelers and bringing airport operations to a halt. A representative of the Association of Greek Air Traffic Controllers said the problem seemed to be a collapse of central radio frequency systems at the Athens and Macedonia area control systems.
And with this, we reach the end of our news for tonight. To catch up on any part of any story you missed, just follow our social media platforms. Thank you for watching and take care.